Welcome to this Mesh2D workflow tutorial. 2D meshes are one of the new types introduced in Resolume 7.14. Meshes allow you to project a material onto a piece of geometry and repeat that geometry many times. This enables you to build cloner effects, pattern generators, video synths, and much more. Fun fact, the new grid cloner in Resolume 7.14 is actually made in wire and uses meshes. That's a pretty cool premise, so let's get started. To create a mesh, you need two things: geometry and a texture material. At release, we have three geometry nodes: rectangle, circle, and triangle. Geometry are geometric shapes made out of triangles. This can be seen when clicking on the rectangle or circle node. Let's create a mesh by sending the rectangle into the Mesh2D node. Well done! You've created your first mesh. Now it is time to create a material. For this, we'll take the texture in node and set it to wire logo. Next, we connect it to a texture material node to create a material out of the texture. Following that, we connect the output of the texture material node to the Mesh2D node. Now we have one really weird looking mesh. Let's remove that white background by setting the blend mode to multiply. That gets rid of the background, but what about the cramped look? That look makes perfect sense if you think about it. The texture used is 1920 by 1080 pixels in size. It has more width than height. Our rectangle is 1 by 1, so basically we're cramming a rectangle into a square. To fix this, we'll take the aspect ratio of the patch from the patch info node and patch it into the width of the rectangle. Now the aspect ratio of the rectangle is the same as the texture in, and our mesh looks normal again. So what's next? How about more meshes, like a lot more meshes? To get started with transforming the meshes, we'll use the Transformation 2D node. This node holds all the transformation info for the meshes. We'll start by creating a grid pattern node and connecting it to the translation inlet. Now crank up the grid pattern to have 10 rows and 10 columns and tweak the values to fit all the meshes onto the screen. Next, we'll have some fun with the scale parameter. We'll create a linear node, set its size to 4 and the min and max to small increments of each other. This gives us some variation in the pattern. Also, by now it's worth noting that we're essentially cloning and transforming the incoming texture 100 times without dropping a single frame. This would be impossible if we were just using textures. Now we'll render our collection of meshes into a texture. For this, we'll use the 2D render node. After the 2D render node, we're working in pixel space again, and we can apply effects and use mixers. But Wireman, what's up with the camera inlet, you might ask? Well, let's see what comes from it. Nice. The camera 2D node can be used to zoom, pan, and rotate the image. Zoom is already there on the node, and to access the panning and rotation you will need to create a Transformation 2D node. And that is it basically for the Mesh2D workflow. I have skipped over the UVs and the box 2D type to keep this tutorial quick and simple. We'll cover those subjects in a separate video. Also note that there is a built-in Mesh2D workflow tutorial in Wire that goes through most of the things I've covered here, but in an interactive format. Now go out there and make some cool stuff with meshes.